But we want to get to the other big story out of our nation's capital. We are less than 1 week into President Trump's 30-day takeover of the Washington, D.C. police, and President Trump is already saying he intends to extend federal control of the force.
We're going to be asking for extensions on that, long-term extensions, because you can't have 30 days. 30 days that's by the time you do it. We're going to have this in good shape. We're going to do this very quickly, but we're going to want extensions. I don't want to call national emergency. If I have to, I will.
To continue control of the D.C. police past the 30 days legally allowed, the president would need congressional approval. Yesterday, Trump said he was confident the Republican majority Congress would give him just that.
Well, if it's a national emergency, we can do it without Congress, but we expect to be to Congress before Congress very quickly. We think the Republicans will do it almost unanimously. So we're going to need a crime bill that we're going to be putting in, and it's going to pertain initially to D.C. We're going to use it as a very positive example.
The president also hinting there at the possibility of extending his takeover of the local police force to other major cities. Meanwhile, the newly federalized law enforcement in Washington, D.C. began operations in the city yesterday. Tensions were high as local and federal officers, some uniformed, some plainclothes, were stationed at various checkpoints downtown, like this one. A large group of demonstrators soon gathered nearby with signs warning motorists of what is to come. Officers stopped cars as they approached the checkpoint and flagged some for additional checks. Witnesses say this car was towed away after the driver was removed from the car and arrested. The 800 National Guard troops that were deployed to the city by President Trump were not seen at the checkpoint. A White House official told NBC News yesterday the deployment of National Guard troops would be significantly higher throughout the week, and the operation would expand from evening shifts to working around the clock. So, Joe, not everybody is embracing this. This is
right.
Dividing Democrats in some ways in terms of the response, but also, as you can see, the residents of Washington, D.C. not feeling completely comfortable with this, some of them.
Well, some people don't like it, and there was, of course, the Subway sandwich assault heard around the world. Someone threw a Subway sandwich at a police officer. It's sort of Lexington shot heard around the world, except in sandwich terms. So, Susan Page, you've lived in D.C. for a very long time. I know people suggest sometimes I overstate the insecurity that D.C. residents have felt over the past 30, 40 years. It's far different than Manhattan. And now let me just say it again. In Manhattan, most people there feel very comfortable at night walking 30, 40, 50 blocks. That's never really been the case in Washington. That's not to say it's a hellscape. But certainly, I would guess there are some Washington residents, and I've talked to some Democrats and members of the press, who are taking a wait-and-see approach. If this is done peacefully, if it's done without more in partnership with the D.C. police, they'll be fine. If not, of course, they'll be fighting that bill as it goes through Congress. What have you heard?
You know, I think this is one more example of President Trump's skill at taking issue in which there is broad public agreement, like illegal immigration ought to be stopped at the southern border, or the sentiment that men should not participate in women's sports, and now standing against crime. There are very few politicians who want to stand up for crime. Now, so it sets a kind of trap for Democrats, because they can say, if Trump says, I'm going to make the capital city safe, everybody's for that. And if Democrats say, well, look, it's at a 30-year low last year, it's declined even more this year, this is not the national emergency it portrays it as being, seems as though they are not taking a tough stance on crime. So I think this has been very tricky for Democrats. And as one result, you see some Democrats, including the leadership of the city, protesting that this federalized takeover of law enforcement in Washington is a bad thing and inappropriate and unnecessary. A lot of Democrats are just going to wait and see, because they're concerned about getting kind of caught in a political trap that the president has set for them.
Yeah, and it does seem, John Lemire, that D.C., even though the president was talking about other cities, D.C. is a one-off. D.C. is obviously the nation's capital, and Congress certainly has a say over what happens there, as does the president in consultation with Congress. But, you know, this is something I will say that Democrats and Republicans have been asking for 30, 35 years about, you know, the nation's capital, why Congress doesn't take a more active role in especially safety and security issues. But in this case, of course, getting the funds to D.C. that D.C. needs. Of course, it was slashed this past year. So they need to get the funds there. But I want to circle back to what Susan said, and that is, this seems like a trap set up for Democrats. Again, I know there are other people watching the show that don't live in D.C. and don't hear from me. I'm telling you, I have received a lot of texts from Democrats that worked on Democratic campaigns who have never voted for a Republican before that says if he doesn't overreach, a big if, but if he doesn't overreach, if he does this in partnership with the D.C. police force, then they will see that as a positive thing.
Yeah, I think it's a really split verdict here. As Susan and others have said, there are some who think this is good. Others say, you know, it's worrisome. They don't want to see President Trump, meddle with local affairs there in Washington. You're right to say that D.C. is a little different. It is the nation's capital. Also, because it's the federal city, the president and Congress have a lot more authority there than they would somewhere else. But you're right to suggest this could be a trap. It's akin to, of course, what we saw in Los Angeles a few months ago when the National Guard was deployed there. National Guard basically just stood around for a couple of weeks, didn't really do anything, but it angered a lot of local residents. It angered the city's mayor, the state's governor, saying that this is unnecessary. This is a dangerous overreach. So, Dave Weigel, let's talk about that for a moment. And Joe is right to underscore that Republicans in Congress cut $1 billion or so of funding that could have gone to the district, that could have been used for all sorts of things to improve quality of life, including public safety. But if the president yesterday, it was striking to have him sort of brashly say, look, we're going to go New York, Chicago, L.A., list the cities. That, I think, is something Democrats who might be leery of making too big of an issue of D.C. because of all the reasons we've discussed. But if he does try to push this somewhere else, then that, I think, turns this into a political opportunity for them.
It could, and this happened in the first Trump administration. The FBI was plussing up law enforcement operations in big cities. The difference at that time was a mass protest movement that would meet these extensions of force in those cities and a political backlash to Trump. And he's a very canny understanding of how things have changed, especially in D.C. So Mayor Bowser has been clashing for years with a more progressive council that has passed criminal justice reforms that she disagreed with or she watered down. And she, in the days since this began, has said in press conferences, community meeting, that yes, the city needs more police. That is not the message of progressives. It's not the message of Democrats in Congress even. They do say they fund policing, they fund law enforcement grants, Republicans want to cut them. They have some messaging here, but the administration has moved into this gap between Democrats who believe that a lot of their party went too far in the post-Ferguson, post-George Floyd area and decriminalizing fare evasion or trying more, or raising the age, I should say, for a young person to be detained. And they have a mayor in D.C. who can't endorse Trump. That'd be suicide. But she does agree with parts of this. So how does that move from city to city? How would Mayor Brandon Johnson of Chicago confront Trump on this? I think quite differently. How would Mayor Zohran Mamdani confront this? I think very differently. But D.C. is a perfect test case for them because they know they have a mayor who agrees with some of the premises, not the takeover, but the premise that there needs to be some correction of what liberals have done.
Well, and this is a trap for good reasons. I mean, you know, the answer to this problem for Democrats is not, oh, everything's okay, there's nothing to see here, move along. Oh, Washington has dropped 24% or whatever in crime. Well, let me give you some other numbers. The Washington Post took a poll in late April, early May. 91% of Washington residents say crime is a problem. 91%. 51%, it is an extremely serious problem. And John Heilemann, we've had people before put this in racial terms. And this is, I must say, this is one thing that I think Democrats have gotten so wrong about crime. So wrong about crime. Let me just read the Washington Post here. There are stark divides among lines of race and income in the poll, with black residents and lower income residents significantly more worried about crime than white residents and those with higher incomes. As they were last year, black women are among the most concerned, with 65% saying crime is a very or extremely serious issue, compared with 82% who said the same thing last year. That's what the mayor understands. Dave was saying the mayor understands this is a problem. That's what the mayor understands. I mean, those are huge numbers. And it is black residents of Washington, D.C., and those who are struggling economically who see it as the most serious problem. This reminds me so much of during the Defund the Police campaign that a lot of people from gentrified areas of New York were talking about. There were, the New York Times reported it, there were a lot of representatives that represented majority black districts in some of the most dangerous areas in New York City. And those representatives were saying, no, don't defund the police. Give us more police for our streets, more police for our businesses, more police for our schools, more police that would allow our children to walk from our homes or our apartments to their schools without being beaten up or attacked by drug dealers. I mean, and again, here we see in Washington, D.C. again, the overwhelming majority of black voters, and especially black women, see crime in D.C. as a very serious crime. So when somebody comes on TV acting like they're the champions of black voters, and no, we can't have this happen, I think they, as Reverend Al would say, they need to wake up from being woke, and they need to look and see who are the people most concerned, even today, by crime in D.C.